We are determined that before the sun sets on this terrible struggle, our flag will be recognized throughout the world as a symbol of freedom on the one hand and of overwhelming force on the other.
History's strange, it's alien, and it won't give us what we would like to have.
George Catlett Marshall was the only American to command three worlds: war, state, defense. He modernized the United States Army, led an 8 million man force through the largest war in human history, and then turned around and rebuilt a shattered continent. Not with speeches, with food, fuel, and patience. That transition from architect of victory to architect of peace defines his legacy. It is also why he remains difficult to summarize and impossible to ignore. Marshall was forged early. At the Virginia Military Institute, he enrolled not because he was destined for greatness, but because he was doubted. When hazed brutally, forced to squat over a bayonet, he refused to name his tormentors. That moment followed him for life. Quiet endurance became his signature. In the First World War, he revealed a different strength. As a staff officer, Marshall planned the secret overnight movement of nearly 600,000 troops. It surprised the Germans and showed that modern war would be won by organization as much as courage. Between the wars, Marshall became a quiet revolutionary. At Fort Benning, he dismantled rigid officer training and replaced it with improvisation and realism. He forced students to think under pressure. He watched closely. Marshall personally identified and mentored more than 100 future generals, men like Omar Bradley and Joseph Stilwell. He kept track of competence long before it was needed. When war came, those men were ready. On September 1st, 1939, the day Hitler invaded Poland, Marshall became Army Chief of Staff. The United States Army ranked 17th in the world. By the end of the war, it numbered more than 8 million. Marshall made that happen by reorganizing the War Department, demanding efficiency and removing officers who could not adapt. He maintained strict professional distance from President Roosevelt, insisting on candor over comfort. That distance preserved trust when it mattered most. Marshall was the first American general to manage a truly global war. He oversaw 9 theaters simultaneously and relentlessly pushed for a Germany-first strategy and a cross-channel invasion of Europe. He believed delay cost lives. Though widely expected to command D-Day himself, Marshall deferred when Roosevelt said he needed him in Washington. He gave the command to Eisenhower without complaint. Churchill later called him the organizer of victory. After the war, Marshall was sent to China to mediate a civil war no outsider could solve. He brokered a temporary ceasefire, but deep distrust doomed the mission. Marshall returned, convinced that the United States must not commit its own forces to a land war in Asia. It was a lesson learned through failure, not theory. Europe in 1947 was starving, broke, and politically unstable. Marshall understood that chaos breeds extremism. In a short Harvard speech, he proposed aid aimed not at nations, but at hunger, poverty, desperation, and collapse. The initiative, he said, had to come from Europe itself. The Marshall Plan delivered $13 billion. More than $150 billion in today's terms. Western Europe stabilized, industry revived, communist influence receded, NATO became possible. When Truman chose to recognize Israel against Marshall's advice, Marshall supported the decision publicly. Civilian authority mattered more than personal disagreement. In 1950, Marshall returned once more as Secretary of Defense during the Korean War. He supported Truman's decision to relieve General MacArthur for insubordination, upholding civilian control of the military. It was unpopular. It was essential. In 1953, Marshall received the Nobel Peace Prize, the first professional soldier ever to do so. Marshall possessed a rare authority rooted in integrity and a deep disdain for false speaking. When he died in 1959, he requested a simple funeral without a eulogy. President Truman called him the greatest military man this country ever produced, not because he sought glory, but because he understood that victory and peace both require discipline, restraint, and the courage to do unglamorous work well.
Check out more stories from history at davedoeshistory.org.